The wedding dress was perfect. Every stitch, every pearl, every hidden seam, Nadia had spent 40 days on it. But when she opened the bridal suite to collect her tools, the room was empty. The bride was gone. The groom stood alone at the window, back turned, holding something small and white. He didn't hear her enter. When he finally turned and saw her face, the color left his completely. What was in his hand, and why did looking at her destroy him? Before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Nadia had done this 100 times. Collect the kit. Check the seams one last time. Leave before the photographs start. Seamstresses don't belong in wedding photographs, everyone knew that without saying it. She took the service elevator to the 14th floor, her small canvas bag over her shoulder, already thinking about the next job. A bridesmaid dress that needed letting out. A mother of the bride hem. The work never stopped, and she was glad for that. Room 1401. The bridal suite. She knocked once, heard nothing, and used the keycard the wedding coordinator had given her. The door swung open, and Nadia stopped. The champagne was still full. 2 glasses, never touched. The bouquet of white peonies had been knocked sideways, petals scattered across the carpet like something had moved past them fast. One ivory heel sat in the middle of the floor, alone, its pair nowhere. The bride was gone. Nadia stood in the doorway for a moment, telling herself there was a normal explanation. Maybe Irina had changed shoes. Maybe the photographs were happening somewhere else. Maybe. Then she saw him. A man stood at the far window with his back to her. Still in his wedding suit. Dark hair. Broad shoulders. One hand pressed flat against the glass, the other holding something small, a photograph, she thought, white and slightly bent at the corner, the way old photographs get when someone carries them too long. Nadia recognized him from the ceremony. Mikhail Sorin. She had read his name in the brief the wedding coordinator sent over, Mikhail Sorin, groom. CEO, Sorin Group. Real estate. One of the largest private developers in the country. A man who, apparently, had enough money to rent out an entire hotel floor for a single wedding. She took one step inside. Her foot brushed the doorframe. He turned. And the photograph fell out of his hand. It didn't slip. It didn't float. It fell, the way things fall when every muscle in your body stops working at the same moment. His hand simply opened, and the photograph dropped, and Mikhail Sorin, CEO, Billionaire, a man whose face appeared on the covers of business magazines, went completely, absolutely pale. He was looking at her like he'd seen something that couldn't exist. Nadia's first instinct was to apologize. She did that, she said she was sorry, that she was only here for her sewing kit, that she hadn't meant to intrude. He didn't answer. She crouched down, reaching for the photograph on instinct, the way you reach for anything someone has dropped. Her fingers touched the edge of it. She turned it slightly, just enough to see the back. There was handwriting there. Small and neat. A name, she thought, or the beginning of one. She couldn't read it before his hand came down and took the photograph from her. Not roughly. That was the strange part. He didn't snatch it. He simply took it back, quietly and completely, the way someone removes something precious before it can be damaged further. Then he straightened. And he looked at her, really looked at her, for one long moment that she couldn't explain afterward. It wasn't anger. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something older than both of those things. He said, "You can leave your invoice with the coordinator." That was all. For words, controlled and clipped, as if he was somewhere far away trying to operate his own voice by remote. Then he walked past her and out the door. Nadia stood in the empty suite for a moment after he left. The champagne sat untouched. The petals were still on the floor. The single shoe was still in the middle of the room. She picked up her sewing kit. She checked it out of habit, needles, thread, the small scissors she'd had since her training. Everything was there. She turned to leave. That's when she saw it. On the carpet. Next to where the photograph had fallen. Something small. Metal. Unremarkable, except that it didn't belong to a bridal suite. It was a plain hotel key, the old kind, a physical key on a simple ring. Not a keycard. Not a modern hotel system. An actual key. With a number written on it in black ink. 114. Nadia picked it up. She turned it over. There was nothing else, no name, no tag, no explanation. Room 114. She hadn't booked room 114. The coordinator hadn't mentioned room 114. And Mikhail Sorin had just walked out of this room without looking at anything he'd left behind. The key sat in her palm, small and heavy. Whatever it unlocked, it wasn't hers. If Nadia's story stayed with you, leave a comment below. What do you think was in that photograph? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're here when chapter 2 arrives. Nadia took the long way home. She told herself it was traffic. But she walked past 2 perfectly good bus stops and didn't stop at either of them. She just kept moving, the canvas bag over one shoulder and the hotel key in her coat pocket, her fingers wrapped around it without meaning to be. By the time she reached her workshop, she had almost convinced herself it was nothing. Almost. The workshop was on the ground floor of a narrow building 2 streets from the market. Small windows, good light in the morning, a bell above the door that rang every time someone entered. Nadia had been there for 11 years. She knew every corner of it the way you know your own handwriting. She hung her coat. Set her bag down. Put the kettle on. The walls were covered in photographs. Wedding photographs, all of them, dozens of couples in front of churches and registry offices and garden venues, formal and smiling, dressed in things Nadia had made or altered or saved at the last minute with a needle and 30 minutes to spare. She had never asked for the photographs. The client sent them anyway, as a kind of thank you. She always put them up. None of them were hers. She had noticed that once, years ago, and then stopped noticing it, the way you stop noticing something that's been true for too long. Her assistant, Palia, was at the back table pinning a hem when Nadia came in. 23 years old, quick with her hands, always reading something on her phone between tasks. "You're back early," Palia said. "How was the Soren wedding?" "Fine." Palia looked up. She had a good eye for when Nadia was telling the truth and when she was using the word fine as a door she didn't want opened. She let it go. For about 4 minutes. Then, "Nadia. Come look at this." She was holding her phone out. On the screen was a scan of an old newspaper, a society column, by the look of it, the kind with grainy photographs and names printed in small bold type underneath. A charity gala. 12 years ago. Palia pointed to one of the photographs. Nadia leaned in. And then she went very still. The woman in the photograph was standing at the edge of a group, not quite part of it. Dark hair. A simple dress. The name printed underneath was not Nadia's name, but the face was. Probably just a resemblance, Palia said, already moving on, already reaching for the next piece of fabric. "You know how old newspaper photos are?" "Yes," Nadia said. "Probably." She went to make the tea. The call came 20 minutes later. The workshop phone, the landline, the number on her business card, rang twice before she picked it up. "Is this Nadia Ivanova? The seamstress?" A woman's voice. Clipped. Professional. "Yes. I'm calling on behalf of the Soren Group, regarding today's wedding. We're following up to ask, did you happen to leave anything behind in the bridal suite?" Nadia looked at the coat hanging by the door. At the pocket where the key was. "No," she said. "I collected everything." A pause. Brief but deliberate. "We're also asking whether anything may have been picked up accidentally. Items belonging to the suite." And there it was. She wasn't being asked if she'd forgotten something. She was being asked if she'd taken something. Nadia kept her voice level. "I don't have anything that isn't mine." Another pause. Then, "Of course. Thank you for your time." The line went dead. Nadia stood with the receiver in her hand for a moment. Then she set it down and walked to the back of the workshop, to the tall wooden cabinet beside the cutting table. The one with the small lock on the bottom drawer. She found the key on her keyring, a different key, older, its edges worn smooth, and opened it. Inside was one photograph. She didn't take it out. She didn't need to. She had looked at it enough times to know every detail without touching it, a woman standing in front of a doorway, wearing a work apron, her hair pinned back. The photograph was old, the colors slightly faded, the edges soft. The woman's face was calm and direct, looking straight at the camera. She looked like Nadia. Not exactly. Not like a mirror. But close enough that strangers, on the few occasions Nadia had ever shown it, asked if it was her mother. It wasn't. Or at least, Nadia didn't know if it was. She had found it tucked inside a box of her adoptive mother's things, years ago, with no name and no date on the back. She had never asked. Her mother had been difficult to ask things. She closed the drawer and locked it. Vera came home at 4:30, dropped her school bag by the door with a sound that suggested it weighed more than she did, and immediately opened the refrigerator. "How was school?" Nadia asked. "Fine." Vera emerged with an apple and climbed onto the stool at the work table. She watched Nadia work for a while, the way she sometimes did, quietly, with that particular 9-year-old focus that meant she was actually thinking about something else entirely. Then she asked, "Mama, do rich people have different memories than us?" Nadia's needle stopped. "What do you mean?" Vera shrugged, turning the apple in her hands. "Like, do they remember things better? Or do they just remember different things?" Nadia looked at her daughter. At the completely ordinary, slightly distracted expression on her face, like the question was no bigger than any other question she'd asked that week. I don't know, Nadia said finally. Why? Vera shrugged again and took a bite of her apple. No reason. We were talking about it at school. She hopped off the stool and went to do her homework. Nadia sat with the needle in her hand and didn't move for a long moment. The workshop phone rang again at 6:15. The same woman's voice. But different this time. The professional distance was still there, but underneath it was something more careful. More deliberate. Ms. Ivanova. I'm calling again on behalf of Mr. Sorin. Nadia waited. Mr. Sorin would like to cover all future alterations and service costs your shop requires. In advance. In full. Nadia said nothing. There's no obligation attached, the assistant added. He simply wanted to extend the gesture. The line stayed open for a moment. Then the call ended. Nadia set the phone down slowly. A man who had looked at her like she was something impossible. A man who had left a key behind on the floor of a bridal suite. A man who, 2 hours later, wanted to pay for her entire livelihood without explanation. She looked at her coat, at the pocket with the key in it. No obligation attached. She didn't believe that for a single second. If this story has you asking the same questions Nadia is, leave your theories in the comments below. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss chapter 3, because the answers are just beginning. Nadia told herself she was just curious. That was all. Professional curiosity. The kind anyone would feel after a stranger looked at them like that and then offered to pay their bills without explanation. She opened her laptop that night after Vera went to sleep, typed Mikhail Sorin into the search bar, and told herself she would spend 20 minutes and then go to bed. That was 3 hours ago. The results were extensive. Business profiles, real estate announcements, a Forbes feature from 4 years ago. Mikhail Sorin, 41. Founded the Sorin Group at 32. Built it from a single commercial property in the east of the city into one of the largest private development firms in the country. Self-made. Private. Rarely photographed outside of formal business settings. Nadia scrolled through image after image. Groundbreakings. Award ceremonies. A single charity gala appearance from 2 years ago, standing at the edge of a group in a dark suit, not quite smiling. She went back further. 5 years. 8 years. 10. And then she stopped. Before age 32, there was almost nothing. A few low-resolution images that could have been anyone. No university photographs. No early career profiles. No hometown mention. No family background in any article she could find. It was as if Mikhail Sorin had been born at 32, fully formed, with a company already in his hands. Everyone came from somewhere. Nobody erased their past that completely by accident. Nadia closed the laptop. Looked at the hotel key on her kitchen table. Left it there and went to bed. She didn't sleep well. The next morning brought a fitting for a former client, a woman named Galina, who had been coming to the workshop for 7 years and always stayed for tea afterward whether Nadia offered it or not. Galina talked while Nadia worked. She always did. Neighborhood news, family updates, complaints about her building's elevator. Nadia listened with half her attention and let the other half work. Then Galina said, "You know, I saw the Sorin wedding was at the Grand this weekend. Did you do the dress?" "I altered it," Nadia said. "The bride's family commissioned someone else for the original." "Sorin." Galina made a small sound, something between recognition and discomfort. "I worked for that family once. Not the son, the father. Victor Sorin. Years ago, different city." She paused. Adjusted her sleeve. Difficult man. Nadia kept her eyes on the hem. "What kind of work?" "Admin, filing, mostly." Another pause, longer this time. "It was a long time ago." And then Galina changed the subject, smoothly, deliberately, the way people change subjects when a door they've opened suddenly feels too wide. She started talking about her daughter's new apartment, and she didn't stop until the fitting was done. Nadia noted the name. Victor Sorin. Different city. Difficult man. She wrote it down after Galina left. She went to the hotel that afternoon. She wasn't sure what she expected to find. She stood at the front desk and explained, calmly, that she had been the seamstress at Saturday's wedding and believed she may have picked up a key by mistake. The desk clerk checked. Room 114, she confirmed, had been checked out. She couldn't give details about the guest, privacy policy, but she could confirm the checkout date. The day before the wedding. Not after. Before. Whoever had stayed in room 114 hadn't been a wedding guest. They had arrived early, stayed one night, and left before the ceremony even began. The key Nadia was carrying had already been returned, or it had never been properly checked in at all. She thanked the clerk and walked back out into the street. The key was in her coat pocket. She closed her fingers around it. Someone had been in that hotel the night before the wedding. Someone connected to Mikhail Sorin. And then they had vanished, leaving a key behind on the floor of a bridal suite on the 14th floor. She didn't understand how it got there. She wasn't sure she was ready to. She stopped at her fabric supplier on the way back, a routine visit, nothing more, a spool of thread she needed for the bridesmaid job. The supplier, an older man named Fetid, had run the shop for 30 years. The walls were covered in the kind of clutter that accumulates when nobody can bring themselves to throw anything away. Old calendars, fabric swatches, framed advertisements for tailoring products no longer manufactured. Nadia was waiting for her change when she looked up. There was a framed advertisement on the wall behind the counter. Black and white. Vintage, the style suggested the 1970s, the kind of print that showed up in old trade magazines. A woman in a work apron stood at a cutting table, looking directly at the camera with an expression that was calm and steady and completely familiar. Nadia stared at it. That one? Fedit followed her gaze. Been there since before I bought the place. Old supplier's advertisement. Nobody I ever knew. Who is she? He shrugged. No name on it. Just the product. Nadia looked at the woman in the advertisement for a long moment. The photograph in her locked drawer at home. The woman standing in front of a doorway in a work apron, hair pinned back. The same calm directness. Not the same photograph. But the same face. She paid for her thread and left. She found the article that evening. It took her 2 hours of searching regional news archives, old digitized local papers, the kind nobody read anymore. But she found it eventually, a short piece about a fire that had destroyed a small tailoring business in a city 400 kilometers away. 17 years ago. One survivor pulled from the building. The survivor's name was partially illegible, the digital scan was poor, the original newsprint damaged. She could make out the first letter. The rest was gone. One survivor. From a tailoring house. 17 years ago. Nadia sat back from the screen. She didn't know what this meant. She didn't know if it meant anything. A fire in another city 17 years ago wasn't connected to a wedding in this city last weekend just because she wanted it to be. She was telling herself that when Vera came in from the hallway, still in her school uniform, holding a folded piece of paper. Mama. Look what I made today. It was a drawing, crayon, the way Vera always worked, with that particular 9-year-old confidence that didn't worry about proportions. A woman in a white dress, standing in front of a large building with many windows. I drew you, Vera said. Nadia took the drawing. Looked at it carefully. The woman in the white dress was standing very straight, looking forward. She had dark hair. The teacher said it didn't look like you, Vera added, already moving toward the kitchen, already thinking about something else. But I said it did. Nadia looked at the drawing for a long time after Vera left the room. The package was on her doorstep the next morning. No postage. No return address. A plain envelope, the kind you could buy anywhere. Her name written on the front in careful, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside, a business card from a law firm she didn't recognize, no individual name, just the firm's details, printed simply on white card. And beneath it, a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. 7 lines. Handwritten. Brief. She deserved to know. You deserve to know. Stop before they stop you. Nadia read it twice. Then she stood in her doorway for a long moment, the morning cold coming through from outside, the paper in her hand. Someone knew she was asking questions. Someone had known before she even started. What do you think is inside that law firm's file? Leave your theory in the comments, some of you are going to be right, and some of you are going to be completely surprised. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss chapter 4. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Not from Mikhail Sorin. Not from his assistant. From a woman named Galina Petrova, and she was crying before she even finished introducing herself. You were there, she said. At the hotel. You were the last one in that room. Please. She's my daughter. Irina's mother. Nadia sat down. 3 days had passed since the wedding. 3 days since a bridal suite full of untouched champagne and scattered petals, since a photograph fell from a man's hand, since a key turned up on the carpet that nobody claimed. 3 days since Nadia had been telling herself, firmly and repeatedly, that none of it was her business. It became her business the moment Irina's mother asked if Nadia had spoken to her daughter before she disappeared. The room was empty when I arrived, Nadia said. She was already gone. A long silence. Then, the hotel says your keycard was the last one used on that door. Nadia had known that. She hadn't let herself think about what it meant. She thought about it now. She was the last person in that room. She had stood there alone with Mikhail Sorin for less than 2 minutes. She had picked up his photograph and he had taken it back. She had found a key on the floor. And Mikhail Sorin, who had looked at her like she was something impossible, knew exactly who had been in that room and when. The private investigator arrived at the workshop the next afternoon. He was a quiet man, unremarkable in the way people are when they practice it. He showed her his credentials, accepted the chair she offered, and set a photograph on her work table without preamble. Irina's family hired me 4 days ago, he said. I've been following several leads. This came up in the process. Nadia looked at the photograph. It was her. Standing outside her own workshop. Shot from across the street, slightly angled, the way surveillance photographs always looked, caught in motion, unaware. She was carrying her canvas bag. She was wearing the gray coat she'd had for 3 years. The timestamp in the corner read 3 days before the wedding. Someone was watching you, the investigator said, before the wedding happened. Nadia kept her face very still. She was good at that. Years of standing in bridal suites while emotions ran high around her had taught her how to be the calm thing in a room full of feeling. Do you know who took this? She asked. Not yet. He paused. But it came from a source connected to the Soren group. She asked him to leave her a contact number. She thanked him. She waited until the workshop door closed behind him and then she sat down at her table and didn't move for almost 5 minutes. Someone had been watching her. Before any of this started. Before Mikhail Soren saw her face and went pale. Which meant his reaction at the wedding wasn't surprise. It was recognition of something he had already known was coming. She called the Soren group's main number at 4 o'clock. She didn't ask for Mikhail. She asked for his assistant, the woman who had called twice, who had offered to pay for the workshop, who had asked careful questions in a careful voice. The assistant picked up on the second ring. I need to speak with you directly, Nadia said. Not on behalf of Mr. Soren. Just you. A pause. Then, quietly, I can't meet at the office. They met at a cafe 2 neighborhoods away, at a corner table, in the middle of the afternoon when it was half empty. The assistant, her name was Daria, Nadia learned, was younger than she'd sounded on the phone. Mid-30s. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and didn't let go. Nadia put the surveillance photograph on the table. Daria looked at it. Something moved across her face. Did you know about this? Nadia asked. No. The word came out fast. Genuine. I didn't know about this. But you knew something. Daria looked out the window. Then back. Her voice dropped to nearly nothing. Ms. Ivanova. I've worked for Mikhail Soren for 6 years. He's not a cruel man. He's not. She stopped. Started again. But there are things happening around him that he doesn't fully control. Things that involve his father's interests, not his own. She pressed her lips together. You don't understand what you've walked into. Then explain it to me. But Daria was already gathering her bag. Already standing. Already looking at the door like she'd stayed too long. I can't, she said. I'm sorry. I genuinely am. She left. Nadia sat with 2 untouched coffees and the photograph of herself on the table, and understood that the woman who had just walked out was frightened. Not of losing her job. Of something else entirely. Vera came home at 4:30 the way she always did, dropped her bag, opened the refrigerator. But she didn't take anything out of it. She stood there for a moment, then let the door close and turned around. Her expression was the particular kind of carefully neutral that 9-year-olds produced when they were deciding whether to say something. Vera. A man came to school today, Vera said. He told the front desk he was a parent. He asked which child was mine. She paused. I mean, which child was yours? The air in the room changed. What did the school do? They said they didn't have him on any list. They went to check and he was just gone. Vera was watching Nadia's face very carefully now. Who was he, Mama? I don't know, Nadia said. That was the truth. And it was the most frightening true answer she had ever given. She waited until Vera was settled at her desk, homework open in front of her, the familiar sounds of pencil on paper filling the small apartment. Then she went to the workshop. To the tall wooden cabinet. The small lock. The worn key. She opened the bottom drawer. This time, she didn't just look. She reached in and took the photograph out. She had owned it for years. She had opened this drawer a dozen times and told herself she wasn't ready. She carried the image of it in her mind so clearly that looking had always seemed unnecessary. She was ready now. She had to be. The photograph was old, the colors slightly faded, the edges soft. It showed a woman standing in front of a doorway in a work apron, her hair pinned back, looking directly at the camera. Nadia had always thought it showed one woman. She had been wrong. There were 2. Standing side by side. Identical in posture, identical in profession, identical in the quiet way they held their hands, relaxed and still, the hands of people used to careful, patient work. One of them Nadia recognized immediately, the face she had looked at so many times she knew it like her own. The other woman she had never seen in her life. She turned the photograph over. On the back, in the same careful handwriting she'd seen on the anonymous note, two things. A date. And a city. The city where the fire happened 17 years ago. Nadia stood in the empty workshop holding the photograph in both hands while Vera's pencil moved quietly across paper in the next room, and for the first time since Saturday, she stopped trying to find an explanation that would make all of this smaller than it was. Something in this story is pulling at you. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think that photograph means. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're here when Chapter 5 arrives. The answer is not what any of us expected. The law firm called at 9 in the morning. Not a letter this time. Not an anonymous note. A real call, from a real person, a man named Arkady Shine, partner at a firm Nadia had looked up after finding their card in the envelope. Established. Legitimate. Not the kind of firm that sent anonymous warnings. We represent the estate of a woman named Lena Vasilieva, he said. She passed away 17 years ago. We've been searching for her surviving family for some time. Nadia sat very still. We believe you may be her sister. She went to their office that afternoon. It was a quiet building, the kind with thick carpet and framed certificates and the specific silence of a place where difficult conversations happened every day. Arkady Shine was in his 60s, careful, unhurried, the kind of man who had learned to deliver information slowly because he had watched people break when it came too fast. He laid it out piece by piece. Lena Vasilieva. Born in the same city as Nadia. Same region. A seamstress, had trained young, ran a small alterations business from a rented workspace. Died in the fire 17 years ago, age 26. No will. No formally identified next of kin. The estate, small, but real, had been sitting in legal holding ever since. Then he opened a second folder. Lena's physical description from official records. Dark hair. Medium height. A small scar on her left hand from a cutting accident in her training years. Nadia looked at her own left hand under the table. There's more, Arkady said. He slid a document across the desk. A DNA cross-reference, not a new test, but a comparison run against Nadia's medical records from a hospital visit 6 years ago. Someone had already done this work. Someone had already found the match. Sibling probability, 94.7%. Nadia read the number twice. She had a sister. She had had a sister. A seamstress, in the same city she came from, who had died in a fire before Nadia ever knew she existed. She sat with that for a moment. The weight of it. A whole person, a life, a face, a pair of hands that knew the same work, gone before Nadia ever had the chance to find her. She spent that evening filling in the rest quietly. It didn't take long. She knew what she was looking for now. Mikhail Sorin's history before age 32, the gap she'd noticed the first night she searched his name. She went back to it with different search terms. Not his name alone, but his name and a city. His name and a date range. His name and a fire. She found a single result. A small mention in a business profile from a decade ago, the kind of background piece journalists write when someone becomes suddenly newsworthy. One line, almost in passing, Sorin has spoken privately of a personal loss in his mid-20s that, in his words, reset everything. She searched Lena Vasilieva's name. Cross-referenced with his. There was almost nothing, which was itself a kind of answer. But in a community notice from the city where the fire happened, archived in a local paper, she found a photograph from a neighborhood event. A young couple at the edge of a group. The woman was dark-haired, calm, looking slightly away from the camera. She looked like Nadia. And the man beside her, younger, without the weight that years of building an empire had put on him, was Mikhail Sorin. Nadia closed the laptop. She understood now. All of it. The photograph falling from his hand. The complete, devastating paleness. The offer to pay for her workshop, guilt money, from a man who didn't know what else to do when a dead woman walked back into his life wearing someone else's name. He had loved Lena. He had lost her. And then Nadia had walked through that door. It wasn't about her. It had never been about her. She was a ghost, someone else's ghost, in a story that began and ended before she ever appeared in it. She felt something loosen in her chest. Not happiness. But something like relief. The kind that comes when a question finally has an answer, even a sad one. She could walk away from this. She could send the law firm her documents, handle whatever the estate process required, and walk away. Let Mikhail Sorin grieve in peace. Let Lena rest. She was ready to do that. Vera came in at 8:30, already in her pajamas, her hair still damp from the bath. She climbed onto the end of Nadia's bed the way she did sometimes when she had something on her mind but wasn't sure how to start. Nadia waited. Mama, Vera said finally. If someone you loved died, would you want to forget them? Or remember them forever? Nadia looked at her daughter. Remember them. Always. Vera nodded slowly, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. Processing. Even if remembering hurt everyone around you? The question landed quietly. The way Vera's questions always did, not sharp, not pointed, just simple and completely devastating in the way that children's questions could be without meaning to. Nadia thought about Mikhail at the window. The photograph he had carried for 17 years. The wedding he had attended with a dead woman's picture in his pocket. I think, she said carefully, that sometimes people don't know how to put something down. Even when holding it costs them. Vera considered this. Then she nodded once, satisfied, the way children are when an adult answer matches something they already suspected, and climbed off the bed. Good night, Mama. Good night. The email from Arkady Shine arrived at 11:15. She almost didn't open it. She had already decided she was done for the night, done with all of it, at least until morning. She was going to sleep and start the estate process tomorrow and let this whole thing settle into something manageable. But the subject line read, "One additional document, please review before proceeding." She opened it. It was a fire investigation report. An internal document from the emergency services, attached to Lena's official file. The kind of paperwork that recorded everything, the structure of the building, the timeline, the survivors. There was one survivor listed. Not Lena. An infant. Female. Approximately 3 months old at the time of the fire. Pulled from the building by the first responders. Transferred to emergency medical services. And then, nothing. No follow-up record. No adoption file. No family notification. No name. The child was never formally identified. Nadia read it once. Then again. Then a third time, the way you read something when your mind keeps refusing to let the words mean what they mean. 3 months old. 17 years ago. In the city where Lena died. She had told herself this was about a sister. She sat in the dark of her bedroom and stared at the screen, and somewhere down the hallway, she could hear Vera breathing in her sleep. If you felt that last moment the way we did, leave a comment below. Tell us what you think that document really means. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're here for Chapter 6, because what comes next will change everything you thought you understood. Nadia had looked at her birth certificate before. Everyone had. You pull it out for school enrollment, for passport applications, for the small bureaucratic moments of life that require you to prove you exist. She had looked at it a dozen times without ever really seeing it. She saw it now. She spread it flat on the kitchen table the next morning, before Vera woke up, before the kettle boiled, before she gave herself time to talk herself out of it. The hospital name was printed in the standard official font. She read it once. Then she opened her laptop and typed the name into the search bar. The hospital was in the Fire City. Not her city. Not the city where she had grown up with her adoptive mother, where she had trained, where she had opened the workshop. A different city, 400 kilometers away. The city where Lena died. Nadia's date of birth was 3 months before the fire. She sat with that for a moment. 3 months. An infant, 3 months old, pulled from a burning building. Never formally identified. She turned the certificate over. Found the issuing official signature at the bottom, a name she had never thought to read before, a stamp she had assumed was routine. It took her 20 minutes to find the hospital's archived staff records from that year, digitized as part of a regional health administration project. She scrolled through the names. The official whose signature was on her birth certificate had not worked at that hospital during that period. The signature was real. The stamp was real. The certificate was not. She called her adoptive mother at 8 in the morning. They hadn't spoken in 4 years, the estrangement had been slow, the kind that happened when two people realized they didn't know how to be family to each other, and eventually stopped trying. The phone rang 6 times. Nadia was about to hang up when the line connected. Silence. Then, her mother's voice, older, careful, Nadia. My birth certificate, Nadia said. The hospital. The signature. I need you to tell me the truth. A very long silence. I always knew this day would come, her mother said quietly. That was all. No explanation. No defense. Just 7 words that confirmed everything and answered nothing. Who gave me to you? Nadia asked. Another silence. Then, a man. We were told not to ask questions. We were told she had died and there was no one else. A pause. We were told you were safe. The line went quiet again. Nadia ended the call. She sat at the kitchen table until she heard Vera's alarm go off down the hall, and then she stood up and made breakfast and said nothing, because some things couldn't be said over toast and school mornings. Arkady Shine answered on the first ring when she called the law firm. She told him what she'd found. The hospital. The signature. The date. She said it all flatly, without emotion, the way she got through things that were too large to feel while they were happening. He was quiet for a moment on the other end. Then he said, Ms. Ivanova. We found the same discrepancies 8 months ago. We delayed contacting you because we needed to be certain. Certain of what? Lena Vasilieva was not your sister. His voice was very gentle. She was your mother. You were the infant survivor. You were 3 months old when the fire started. Nadia didn't speak. We believe you were placed with a family shortly after through an unofficial arrangement. Someone with resources and connections facilitated it. We don't yet know who. She already knew who. She just didn't have proof yet. She called Mikhail Sorin directly this time. Not his assistant. His personal number, which the private investigator had included in his notes. He picked up after 2 rings. I know, she said. About Lena. About who she was. About what I am. She paused. Tell me you didn't know. A long silence on his end. I can't tell you that, he said. The words landed like something physical. How long? 9 years. 9 years. Vera's entire lifetime. You watched us, Nadia said. It wasn't a question. Yes. You never came. No. She wanted to be angry. The anger was there, she could feel it waiting behind everything else, patient, enormous. But underneath it was something she couldn't name yet. Something that had to do with a man carrying a dead woman's photograph to his own wedding, watching over a child he had never met for 9 years, staying away because he didn't know what he had the right to be. Why Vera? She asked. Why did you start watching 9 years ago specifically? The silence that followed was a different kind. Careful. Deciding. We should meet, he said. There are things I can't explain properly over the phone. Vera came home at 4:30 and dropped her bag and then immediately picked it up again and pulled something out, a poster board, the kind schools assign for art projects, decorated in crayon and colored pencil. A family tree. She spread it on the work table proudly. Her name at the bottom. Nadia's above it, connected by a line. Spaces branching outward for grandparents, for relatives, for the structure of a family that extended beyond just 2 people. Most of the spaces were blank. Nadia looked at the grandfather space on Nadia's side of the tree. Empty. A question mark penciled in lightly. I didn't know who to put, Vera said matter-of-factly, already losing interest, already moving toward the kitchen. So I left it for later. Nadia looked at the blank space for a long moment. For later. She went to the meeting alone. Mikhail had given her an address, not his office, not a cafe. A private room in a quiet building, the kind of place that existed for conversations that couldn't happen anywhere public. She was prepared for Mikhail. She had been preparing for him since the moment she understood what he knew and how long he had known it. She was not prepared for the second person in the room. An elderly man sat across from Mikhail at the table. Silver-haired. Straight-backed. Commanding in the way that men were commanding when they had spent decades being obeyed without having to ask. He watched Nadia walk through the door with an expression she couldn't read, not surprise, not guilt. Recognition. He had been expecting her. He looked at her for a long moment in total silence. Then he said, clearly and quietly, "You look exactly like your grandmother." Nadia went still. Mikhail, across the table, did not look at his father. He looked at the surface in front of him. His jaw was tight. His hands were flat on the table. He looked like a man who had not wanted this meeting to happen this way. That moment when the old man spoke, "Leave a comment and tell us what you felt. If this story is keeping you up at night, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next." Viktor Sorin stood when she walked in. That was the first thing she noticed. He stood, slowly, deliberately, with the careful courtesy of a man who had practiced being respected for so long it had become automatic. Silver hair, straight posture, a dark suit that cost more than Nadia made in a month. He looked at her the way someone looks at a painting they have thought about for a very long time. Mikhail stayed seated. He didn't look at his father. He didn't look at Nadia. He looked at the table. That was the second thing she noticed. Viktor gestured to the chair across from him. His voice, when he spoke, was warm. Measured. The voice of a man who understood that tone was everything. "Please," he said. "Sit. There is a great deal I owe you." Nadia sat. She kept her hands flat on her thighs. She watched him. He began to talk. His story was detailed. Specific. The kind of specific that felt like truth, names, dates, a sequence of events that connected cleanly from one point to the next. He had known Lena, he said. Had known her through Mikhail, had seen immediately that she was a good woman, despite his reservations about the match. When the fire happened, when everything collapsed so fast and so completely, he had acted the only way he knew how. Lena had enemies, he said. His voice was steady, but something underneath it was performing steadiness. A business dispute. A man she had trusted who felt threatened by her. I had reason to believe that if it became known a child had survived." He stopped, pressed his lips together. "I made a decision. I arranged for you to be placed safely, quietly, with people who would ask no questions and raise no flags." He looked at her directly. His eyes were wet. "I have thought about that decision every day since." Nadia watched a tear move down his face. He didn't wipe it away. He let it sit there, visible evidence. Across the table, Mikhail had not moved. His hands rested on the surface in front of him. Still. Controlled. But Nadia was watching his hands. Victor's story continued. He described the difficulty of it, the weight of carrying the secret, the years of wondering whether he had done the right thing, the way guilt accumulated even when the choice had been made out of love, out of protection. He was very good. Nadia could feel the story working on her, the way a well-made thing works, drawing you in, making you want to believe it because believing it was easier than not believing it. She let him finish. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "Who started the fire?" The room went quiet. Victor held her gaze. "It was an accident," he said. "An electrical fault. The investigation confirmed it." Nadia didn't look away from him. But she felt it, the shift at the edge of her vision. Mikhail's hand, flat on the table, tightening. Just slightly. Just once. The knuckles going briefly white before he released it. He hadn't moved his face. He hadn't made a sound. But his hand had answered the question his mouth wasn't allowed to. Victor was still talking, something about the investigation, the official record, the tragedy of accidents. Nadia was no longer listening to the words. She was watching the shape of a man who had rehearsed this story so many times it had worn smooth, and wondering how many other people had sat in this room and been given the same careful performance. The private investigator called while she was still in the building, waiting for the elevator. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. "I've been going through the fire records," he said. "The original investigation, not the summary. I found something." "Tell me." "An insurance claim. Filed on the building 48 hours before the fire started." A pause. "It wasn't filed by Lena. It was filed by a business partner. A man named Grishin." Another pause. Grishin was a partner of Victor Sorin's. They had 3 joint investments in that city at the time. Nadia stood very still in the elevator lobby. "The claim was for total loss," the investigator continued. "It was filed 2 days before the building burned." The elevator arrived. Nadia didn't get in. She let the doors close again. Victor hadn't hidden her to protect her from Lena's enemies. Victor was Lena's enemy. The fire hadn't destroyed something he wanted to protect. It had destroyed something he needed gone, a woman his son loved, a relationship that threatened whatever Victor Sorin had decided mattered more. And when a child had survived, when Nadia had been pulled from the building alive, he hadn't saved her out of guilt. He had managed her. Hidden her. Kept her contained and quiet and unknown, the way you contained anything that could one day be used against you. The tears. The detailed story. The warm voice and the careful eyes. All of it was control. Just control in a different shape. She was walking through the parking structure when she heard footsteps behind her. Fast. Deliberate. She turned. Mikhail. He had come after her alone, no assistant, no car, just him in his suit, slightly out of breath, like he'd moved quickly the moment he had the chance. He stopped a few feet away. The parking structure was dim and quiet around them. Somewhere above, Victor Sorin was still sitting at that table, not yet aware his son had left the room. Mikhail looked at her. He looked like a man who had been waiting a very long time to say something and had just run out of reasons not to. "I didn't know," he said. "About the fire. About what he did." His voice was low and completely without performance. "For 9 years I believed I was watching over you because I owed you something. Because my father had made a choice that took your mother from you and I couldn't undo it." He paused. "I thought it was an accident. I thought the guilt I was carrying was about not saving her in time. About believing him when he said she had left." He looked at her steadily. "He told me you were dead too." 7 words. That was all. Nadia stood in the dim parking structure and understood that the man in front of her had spent 17 years grieving 2 people who were both still alive, one of them standing 3 feet away from him, the other buried under a story his father had built to keep both of them from ever finding each other. She didn't speak. There was nothing to say yet. The anger was there. The grief was there. Everything was there, all at once, too large for the space between them. Mikhail didn't move. He wasn't asking for anything. He was just standing there, the way someone stands when they've finally put down something they've carried for too long and they don't know yet what it feels like to be without the weight. Victor Sorin smiled through that whole conversation, and Mikhail's hand told us everything. Leave a comment and tell us what you think happens next. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're here for Chapter 8, because Mikhail's full truth is the most painful part of this whole story. They didn't go back inside. Mikhail didn't suggest it and Nadia didn't move toward the exit. They just stood there in the parking structure, two people in the half-dark, and after a moment Mikhail walked to a low concrete barrier and sat down on it. Not gracefully. Not like a CEO. Like someone whose legs had decided they were done. Nadia stayed standing. She wasn't ready to sit. She wasn't sure she was ready for any of this. But she didn't leave. "Tell me," she said. He told her. He had met Lena when he was 24. She was working out of a small rented space in the east of the city, alterations, custom work, the same kind of careful precise labor that Nadia now did every day. He had gone in to have a jacket repaired. He had come back 6 more times that month for reasons that had nothing to do with the jacket. His father had made his feelings clear. Not loudly, Victor Sorin never did anything loudly. But clearly. Lena was not the right kind of person. She had no family connections, no financial standing, no usefulness to the Sorin name. These things were said with the tone of someone explaining something obvious to someone being deliberately slow. Mikhail had ignored him. For the first time in his life, he had simply ignored his father and kept going. They were engaged by the time he was 25. She was the only person, Mikhail said, who didn't want anything from me. He said it simply, without self-pity, just as a fact. Not the name. Not the money. Not the access. She just wanted me there. He stopped for a moment. I don't think I understood how rare that was until she was gone. The night of the fire, Mikhail had been on his way to meet her. He was 40 minutes out when his father called. Victor's voice had been calm, it was always calm, that was part of what made it so effective. He said that Lena had come to see him. That she had made a decision. That she had taken some things and left, and that she had asked Victor to tell Mikhail she was sorry. He said she couldn't go through with it, Mikhail said. That the family pressure was too much. That she had chosen to disappear rather than keep fighting. He looked at his hands. I believed him. He said it without excusing himself. Just laid it flat. He had been 25, in love, and his father had looked him in the eye and said the words calmly, and he had believed them. He had turned the car around. He had gone home and sat in his room for 3 days and grieved it as abandonment, as Lena choosing to leave rather than Lena being taken. He had never forgiven her for it. That was the part he said with the most difficulty. The part where his voice finally changed. I was angry at her for years. For leaving. For not fighting harder. For choosing the easy way out. He exhaled. She didn't leave. She was already gone. And I spent years being angry at a dead woman for something she didn't do. The weight of that, 17 years of misplaced anger sitting on top of grief, settled into the space between them. Nadia didn't speak. There was nothing to say to that kind of damage. You just let it be what it was. 9 years ago, Mikhail had been reviewing documents from a corporate acquisition, a small regional firm his company was absorbing, routine paperwork, the kind that crossed his desk in stacks. He almost missed it. A birth record. Filed in a regional archive and included in the acquisition's property documentation by bureaucratic accident. An infant girl. A fire. A date. He had read the date 3 times. Then he had quietly closed the folder, told no one, and hired private investigators using personal funds, nothing connected to the Sorin. Nothing that would surface in any internal audit. They found Nadia within 4 months. When I understood who you were, he said, I understood everything else at the same time. The fire wasn't an accident. Lena hadn't left. My father had known from the beginning, where she was, what happened, that you had survived. He paused. He had known for 8 years before I found that document. 8 years. He had sat with that knowledge for 9 more years without confronting his father. Without approaching Nadia. Without doing anything visible at all, just watching, quietly, from a distance, making sure nothing happened to her or to Vera. Nadia finally asked the thing she had been holding. Why didn't you come to us? He was quiet for a moment. What would I have been to you, he said. The son of the man who killed your mother. The person who was supposed to love her and believed a lie and turned his car around. He looked up. I failed her. I couldn't undo that. I thought the least I could do was make sure you were safe without making you carry the weight of knowing me. It wasn't a complete answer. Nadia knew that. There was more in it, guilt, and fear, and the paralysis that comes when someone has done nothing for so long that doing something starts to feel impossible. But it was an honest answer. And honesty, right now, was what she needed more than completeness. Then he said, there's one more thing. She waited. The acquisition. The document I found 9 years ago, the birth record that led me to you. He met her eyes. It wasn't a random company. It was one of my father's own firms. A subsidiary, held under a different name, the kind of structure that takes investigators months to trace. Nadia went still. Victor found that document first, Mikhail said. He knew it existed. He had access to every file in that acquisition before I did. A pause. And then after I found it, after I started asking questions quietly, the document disappeared from the archive. Someone had it pulled. Officially misfiled. He let that land. My father found you 9 years ago, Mikhail said. And then he buried the record so that you would stay buried with it. The photograph, Lena's photograph, the one that had fallen in the bridal suite, the one he had carried for 17 years in the inside pocket of whatever jacket he was wearing that day, suddenly meant something different than it had an hour ago. He hadn't brought it to the wedding because he couldn't let go. He had brought it because he had spent 17 years carrying the only proof he had that she had existed at all. That she had been real. That what happened to her had been real. Because in his father's version of events, Lena Vasilieva had simply chosen to disappear. And Viktor Sorin needed that version to stay true. Mikhail carried that photograph for 17 years. And Viktor knew every word of this story from the beginning. Leave a comment, tell us what you would have done in Nadia's place. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're here for Chapter 9, because the final truth about Vera is the one nobody saw coming. Nadia didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table after midnight with Mikhail's investigator file spread in front of her, the full file, which he had sent over that evening without being asked, as if he had known she would need it. Pages of documentation. Birth records, fire reports, legal correspondence, property records going back 17 years. She had been through it twice already. She went through it a third time. Slower. And somewhere around 2 in the morning, she stopped at a number she had read before without really reading it. Vera's age. 9 years old. Mikhail had found that document, the birth record, the acquisition file, 9 years ago. She sat very still. 9 years ago, he had discovered she existed. 9 years ago, he had begun watching her from a distance. 9 years ago, he had decided not to approach. 9 years ago, Vera was born. The timeline wasn't a coincidence. She had been looking at it for days without letting herself see it. Now she saw it. And once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. She turned back to the file. There was a tab she hadn't opened. Near the back, behind the legal correspondence, held with a small paper clip. It didn't have a label. She had assumed it was duplicates. She opened it. It was one page. A hospital record, not Vera's. Nadia's own. From the clinic 3 streets over, 9 years ago. Her admission record from the night Vera was born, a difficult delivery, one that had gone long enough and complicated enough that the clinic had required an emergency contact on file. Nadia looked at the name listed in that field. It wasn't Mikhail. It was a name she didn't recognize, a man's name, followed by a title and a firm designation she had to read twice before she understood what she was looking at. A representative. Acting on behalf of a private account. A private account that, when she searched the reference number at the bottom of the page, traced back through 2 shell designations to a holding company she had seen before. Viktor Sorin's. She set the page down carefully. Then she picked it up again. Then she set it down again. Viktor had known about Vera since the night she was born. Not 9 years later. Not recently. Since the very beginning, since the first hours of Vera's life, someone using Viktor's resources had been listed as emergency contact for Nadia during her delivery. Someone who had access to Mikhail's investigators, to Mikhail's accounts, to the structure of what Mikhail had built quietly over years, and had used it without Mikhail knowing. Viktor hadn't just been watching. He had been inside everything from the start. Nadia sat back and made herself think it through completely, the way she worked through a complicated alteration, not rushing, not skipping steps, following the scene wherever it led. Viktor had arranged for the law firm to contact her. The anonymous note, the business card, the formal letter, all of it had felt like someone breaking a secret open. But Viktor was a man who controlled what surfaced and when. A man who had suppressed a birth record for 9 years and a fire investigation for 17. He didn't break things open. He opened them deliberately, at the moment of his choosing. So why now? She thought about what Arkady Shine had said carefully and what he hadn't said. She thought about the phrase legally or financially relevant. She thought about Viktor sitting across from her with tears on his face, giving her a story designed to land as truth. Something had changed. Something in the legal or financial structure of the Sorin Empire had shifted in a way that made Nadia, and Vera, relevant in a new way. An heir. A claim. A complication that Viktor needed to get ahead of before it surfaced on its own. He hadn't found her to give her answers. He had found her to manage her. The whole thing, the law firm, the stage discovery, the compassionate performance, was Victor Sorin deciding that a controlled reveal was safer than an uncontrolled one. He had brought Nadia into the light because he needed to see exactly what she knew and what she would do with it. He had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. She stared at the hospital record on the table. He had been 3 steps ahead since the night Vera was born. She heard small footsteps in the hallway. Vera appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, hair messy, holding a folded piece of poster board. She had clearly just woken up, but she had the alert look of someone who had remembered something important mid-sleep and gotten up specifically to deal with it. "I finished it," Vera said. "Finished what?" "The family tree." She set the poster board on the table, carefully, away from the papers, because she could see Mama was working on something. "I filled in the grandfather space." Nadia looked at the family tree. At the branch that had been blank the last time she saw it, marked only with a question mark in light pencil. Vera had written 4 words in the careful, slightly uneven printing of a 9-year-old who was proud of her handwriting. "Unknown, but maybe looking for us." Nadia looked at those words for a long moment. "Go back to bed," she said quietly. "Good job, baby." Vera nodded seriously and disappeared back down the hallway. No questions. No drama. Just a task completed and reported and done. Nadia sat alone with the family tree and the hospital record and the full weight of what Victor Sorin had been managing for 9 years, and she picked up her phone. Mikhail arrived 20 minutes later. She had given him the address without explaining why. He had come without asking questions. He stood in her kitchen doorway in a coat he'd clearly thrown on quickly, and he looked at her face, and he waited. She held out the hospital record. He took it. "Read it." She watched him read it, watched the moment his eyes found the emergency contact field, found the name, found the firm designation. Watched him trace the same path she had traced an hour ago. His face went through something she couldn't fully name. Recognition. Then understanding. Then something that went past both of those into a place that had no clean word. He looked up. And he went pale. Not the slow drain of a man processing bad news. The immediate, complete paleness she had seen once before, in a bridal suite, on a Saturday, when he had turned from a window and seen her face for the first time. The same way. Exactly the same way. She understood then that whatever he was seeing in that hospital record, it was something he hadn't known. Something Victor had done in his name, using his resources, at the moment Vera came into the world, and Mikhail was learning it right now, standing in her kitchen, the same moment she needed him to. He opened his mouth. Closed it. The page shook very slightly in his hand. Vera filled in that blank space with 4 words, and those 4 words broke everything open. Leave a comment and tell us what you felt in that moment. Subscribe and turn on notifications because Chapter 10 is the ending this story has been building toward from the very first page. Victor Sorin did not deny a single thing. That was what Nadia hadn't expected. She had prepared for another performance, the careful voice, the managed tears, the story shaped to land as truth. She had prepared to sit across from a man defending himself. Instead, he listened. He read the hospital record when she put it in front of him. He looked at the investigator's fire documentation. He sat with the full file open between them and he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I did what I believed was necessary. Not an apology. Not a denial. A position. Lena would have destroyed everything I built," he said. "Not intentionally. She wasn't that kind of person. But Mikhail would have walked away from the company. From the family structure. From everything I had spent 30 years creating. For a seamstress with no family, no resources, no future that matched ours." He paused. "I made a choice. I have made choices like it many times. That is what it means to protect something." Nadia looked at him. At the completely calm face of a man who had organized a fire, hidden a child, and suppressed a birth record for 9 years, and who genuinely believed he had been doing his job. "You protected yourself," she said. "That's the only thing you ever protected." Victor held her gaze. He didn't agree. He didn't disagree. He just looked at her with the steady eyes of someone who had decided, a long time ago, that certain people's opinions of him simply didn't matter. That was the most honest moment he had ever given her. And it was enough. Mikhail was waiting outside. He had been there the whole time, not inside, not interfering, just present, the way he had been present for 9 years. Standing a short distance from the door with his hands in his coat pockets. When Nadia came out he looked at her face and didn't ask how it went. "I need you to know," he said, "that I'm not going to tell you what to do with any of this. The legal options, the financial claims, what you could pursue against him, that's yours. All of it." He paused. "Whatever you decide, I'll support it. Whatever you need, I'll provide it. Not because I owe you a transaction. Because I do owe you. For different reasons. And I know those aren't the same thing." It was the most careful thing he had ever said to her. And it was careful because it was true. He was drawing a line between debt and choice, between guilt and genuine offer, and he was letting her stand on whichever side of it she needed. Nadia nodded. Just once. I know what I'm going to do, she said. She did it the next morning. Not a lawsuit. Not a press call. Not a dramatic confrontation designed to produce a public result. Those things might come later, through proper channels, in proper time. But they weren't the first thing. The first thing was quieter and more precise. She compiled the complete file, the fire investigation with the insurance claim, the forged birth certificate, the hospital record, the 17 years of archival suppression, and she sent it to the city archivist's office with a formal written request. She asked that Lena Vassilievna's name be officially reinstated in the fire victim records. Removed from the unidentified column where she had sat for 17 years. Corrected across every official document that listed her status as unknown or unresolved. She asked that the record show, Lena Vassilievna, seamstress. Died in the fire. Survived by a daughter. That was all. It was a small thing. A bureaucratic correction. The kind of adjustment that moved through official systems quietly, without announcement, updated in databases that most people never looked at. But Victor Sorin had spent 17 years managing exactly these kinds of documents. He understood, better than anyone, what happened when official records started correcting themselves. How one correction required another. How an archivist's note led to a journalist's question led to a legal review led to an auditor's inquiry. How the quiet machinery of truth, once set in motion, didn't stop because someone preferred it to. She didn't need to destroy him dramatically. She just needed to tell the truth in the right place and let it move at its own pace. It moved. 3 weeks later, she took Vera to meet Mikhail. She didn't call it anything. She didn't explain it to Vera beyond saying there was someone she wanted her to meet. Vera had accepted this with the particular 9-year-old trust that assumed Mama's decisions were reasonable until proven otherwise. They met at a park, neutral ground, open air, nothing formal about it. Mikhail was there before them, sitting on a bench, without a suit for the first time Nadia had seen him. He looked like a person rather than a position. Vera assessed him immediately. She did this with everyone, a quiet, thorough look that took in all the available information before she committed to any response. She was very good at it. They sat together for a while. Mikhail didn't try too hard. He didn't perform warmth or manufacture connection. He just answered the questions Vera asked, about what he did, whether he had any pets, why he was at a park on a Tuesday, in the straightforward way that children respected more than any adult effort to charm them. After about 20 minutes, Vera had stopped paying attention to his answers and started paying attention to him. The way he held his coffee cup. The way he sat with both feet flat on the ground. The way his hands rested on his knees between sentences. She looked at Nadia's hands. Then back at his. You have the same hands as my mama, she said. Not a question. Not a dramatic announcement. Just a fact she had observed and reported, the way she reported most things. Then she went back to watching a dog chase a pigeon across the grass, immediately interested in something else. Neither adult spoke. There wasn't anything to say. Vera had said it. The thing that was true and enormous and would take years to become whatever it was going to become, she had named it in 8 words and moved on, the way children moved on, because for her it was simply a thing that was true and the world was still full of dogs and pigeons. That night, after Vera was asleep, Nadia sat alone at her work table. The workshop was quiet. The bell above the door was still. Outside, the street made its usual sounds, a distant car, someone's window closing, the ordinary texture of a neighborhood at rest. She reached into the inside pocket of her coat. Mikhail had given it to her at the park, quietly, while Vera wasn't looking. He hadn't made a speech about it. He had just held it out and waited for her to take it. Lena's photograph. Nadia set it on the work table and looked at it for a long time. The woman in the work apron, standing in front of a doorway, looking straight at the camera with that calm and direct expression. The face that was hers and wasn't hers. The hands that Vera had just identified without knowing what she was identifying. She didn't cry. She had expected to. She had thought, when this moment came, that it would break something open. But it didn't. It just settled, the way things settled when they finally landed in the right place after a long time of being somewhere they didn't belong. She stood up. Took the photograph to the wall. All those weddings. All those couples, formal and smiling, in front of churches and registry offices and garden venues. Dozens of them, filling the wall she had looked at every day for 11 years. She found a space. Not hidden in a corner, a real space, visible, among the others. She pinned Lena's photograph there. The workshop was the same. The needle and thread were in the same place. The morning would bring the same work, hems and alterations and other people's dresses, the careful and necessary labor that she was good at and had always been good at and would keep being good at. But now one of the photographs on the wall was family. And that, finally, was enough. This story took 10 chapters and it still feels like it isn't over, because the best ones never really are. Leave a comment and tell us which moment stayed with you the longest. If this story found its way to your heart, subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more stories like this one waiting for you.